We've been watching the numbers on the big board there drop on Wall Street. Picked up a little bit and dropping again, almost 600 points now. This in reaction to the House of Representatives failing to pass a $700 billion bailout plan for the banking industry. We're hearing from the president, very disappointed. We'll be meeting with his advisors and with the congressional leaders to talk about what comes now. What will happen next? Back to the drawing board, we suppose. Back to another plan. More changes to be made. Perhaps again to the House floor for more debate. But indeed, the plan that was before the House this afternoon did fail, 205 to 228. The Republicans were largely those who voted against the measure. 133 Republicans voting against it, had 95 Democrats with them on the no votes, 140 Democrats and 65 Republicans voting in favor of passing this. This, of course, the largest government intervention in the market since the Great Depression. Republicans and Democrats blaming each other for the failure of this measure. The president now planning to meet with congressional leaders, with his advisors, to find out what to do now. What we have seen is reaction even when the vote was taking place and it didn't look good for the measure. The Dow plunged. All right, let's go now to hear some reaction from the House of Representatives. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. We are obviously disappointed that this bill was unable to muster the necessary votes to pass. We remain committed to working on a bipartisan basis to bring a bill to the floor that will garner the necessary votes to avoid a financial collapse. I was disappointed that a process that over the last several days has yielded a bipartisan product involved negotiators from both sides of the building and both sides of the aisle, took a very marked partisan turn at the end of the debate, which was very different than the rhetoric that we heard out of Chairman Frank or Leader Hoyer or our leader, John Boehner. And with that, I'd like to introduce our leader, who's been from the earliest stages of this, committed to working with both sides of the aisle to produce a product that is good for America. John Boehner.
Americans are angry, and so are my colleagues. They don't want to have to vote for a bill like this. And I understand that. But I have concerns about what this means for the American people, what it means for our economy, and what it means for people's jobs. I think that we need to renew our efforts to find a solution that Congress can support. I do believe that we could have gotten there today had it not been for this partisan speech that the Speaker gave on the floor of the House. I mean, we've put everything we had into getting the votes to get there today. But the Speaker had to give a partisan voice that poisoned our conference, caused a number of members that we thought we could get to go south. And at the end of the day, this is not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about our economy and what's best for the American people. And regardless of what happened today, we have no choice, in my view, but to work together to try to find a solution to make sure that we save our economy and we save our constituents. Roy Blunt.
Well, thank you, John. We did think we had a dozen more votes going to the floor than we had. No more than that, but we thought we had a dozen more. I think, unfortunately, too many of our members were already on the floor when they heard that late speech by the Speaker. During this whole process, the tone in the room was so much better than the tone outside the room. We worked together well to try to come up with a compromise that could pass today, that the President could sign, that would do what needs to be done in the economy. But every time you turn on television or read an article about the press reports of what the other side was saying, it was all about how Republicans either were unpatriotic or were there too late or whatever. Well, we're going to reach back out to them. We're certainly going to reach back out to our members. We're going to try to do our best to find a solution here that works for the American people. No matter how many times I said, or Mr. Boehner said, or Mr. Hoyer said, or Mr. Frank said, we've got to put partisanship aside. There was too much of that still going on, and a clock that nobody could control. Clearly needing to respect the holidays of this week, the Jewish holidays of this week, meant that we had to rush things in a way that made that job very hard, and we made it harder today by so much partisan discussion in what should have been a bipartisan effort to solve this problem for the American people. But we're going to reach back out to them. We're going to be talking to our members and see how we can come together in the next few days to reverse whatever negative impact there may be in the economy over the next few days, because Congress has failed to act. And remember, we're not in the majority in the Congress that failed to act today, and we need to reach back out to that majority, and hopefully they'll allow us to be part of a solution rather than continuing to pursue a partisan discussion. Eric?
Right here is the reason I believe why this vote failed. And this is Speaker Pelosi's speech that frankly struck the tone of partisanship that frankly was inappropriate in this discussion. There were several meetings day in and day out of members on both sides of the aisle trying to get up to speed on this issue of the economy and of the capital markets, and frankly a lot of agreement. And I think that this is a case of a failure of Speaker Pelosi to listen not only to her members, but certainly to our members and the common bonds that brought our members together on this very, very important issue facing the American people. This is not a partisan crisis. This is an economic crisis facing everyone in this country. And to look at the votes today, 94 Democrats voted no. 94. Now, when we were in the majority, I think we would make a decision that we would be able to come to the floor and bring a solution to the American people and pass it. They made a decision to leave 94 of their votes off the table, and frankly, as you can see, a majority of our votes that wouldn't go along. Clearly, this is an instance where you see Speaker Pelosi's failure to listen, failure to lead. This caps off a year that I think has been probably the most unproductive year in the U.S. Congress that I've seen in my lifetime. No production of any bailout bill, no energy bill, no appropriations process, very little to show the American people. So we're going to go and, as our leaders have said, go back to the drawing table and look to see where we can